Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 15 in the Maamor Mimana, which Be'ezus Hashem is going to be the last class in this discourse, which is the eighth. This is this discourse Mimana 5672 is the eighth discourse in the great book B'Shasha Hegdimu. This is class number 3 in chapter 32. In this part, we're going to circle back to the answering the question that he asked at the beginning of the discourse, why regarding the difference regarding the blessing that Bilam, the Gentile anti-Semitic prophet, was forced to utter blessings. So in his blessing, he said, "Who can count the dust of Yakov, or the earth of Yakov? Who can count the earth of Yakov, the soil of Jacob, or mispar and count as Yisroel, a quarter of Israel or a division of Israel." So over here, two names are mentioned, Yakov and Yisroel. Generally, we know that Yakov represents an inferior level, and Israel represents a superior level. That's why we know that Jacob had a name change when he reached a certain level of triumph in his life, spiritual attainment. That's when he received the name Israel. So the Jewish people, his descendants, are also referred to by these two names. But Yaakov is referring to more simpler Jews. Yisroel is referring to a more higher level of Jew. So the question then became, how come by both of them it expresses the same idea, who can count? But the emphasis is stronger on the non-ability to count. By Yaakov, it seems to emphasize that stronger than when it comes to Israel. Because by Israel it says, and count, and you could mistakenly read it, and that you could count. It's just that when you connect it to the beginning of the verse, you realize that on this as well, it says, me, who can count? But over there, it's not so clear. But when it comes to Yaakov, it seems that it's hands down, no one can count, which is a little bit strange because we'd think it should be the opposite. The Jewish people that are on a higher level, their attainment should be non-countable. But the Jewish people that are on a lower level, their attainment should be countable. But yesterday we explained that this is referring to the Jews, the Jacob Jews are referring to the Baal Tshuva, those who return to God from the distance. And they activate, because they're driven by such a powerful energy, because they're coming from the far and they need to compensate, or they're running away from a disconnect and from separation from God, they evoke they're so intense in their service, they reach much higher, they reach to a level that has no relationship to being counted, versus the level of Israel, which are Jews who are continuously connected. They're lacking that intensity in their service due to their regularity, due to the commonality of their connection, due to the familiarity of their, due to them being kind of in a constant state of connection. So when they're motivated, of course they're excited, but their excitement does not peak, does not rapture, and because of that, it's containable. So therefore, they reach a level that is both within number and beyond number. That's why regarding them, you say something. The verse implies that you could count, but the really deeper meaning is that you can't count, because that's kind of like in between counting and non-counting. And this is going to be explained based on the levels that we discussed earlier within the light. There's a certain level in the light where the light registers into the vessels, and then on that level it could be counted. There's a level of the light that the light is above the vessels. On that level is beyond being counted, but it's related to being counted, because it's already, these very lights are soon going to settle in the vessels and they're going to be counted. Then there is a level of the first level where the 10 hidden sefirot are still hidden in the Ein Sof. They have utterly not countable, and that's a much higher level. That's where the Baal Tshuva reaches, the penitent reaches. And as we're going to see also, maybe even higher than that, maybe even totally beyond the 10 spheres completely, into the level of Ein Sof itself, where there is even beyond the Esses Spheros Hagnuzais, even beyond the 10 hidden spheres in the Ein Sof, and tapping God's light as it is completely unadulterated and unmitigated and unadjusted and unadapted and not bent in any way whatsoever. Okay, let's read over here. Based on all this, we'll understand Afar Yakov. Who can count the dust, the earth of Yakov? And can count. Yisroel, the one of the divisions of Israel, because the Jewish people were divided into 4 divisions. 3 tribes were all unified under one banner. And since there are 12 tribes, there are 4 divisions. So who can count even one division? So now he's going to explain first the second half of the verse. The word Rova, Yesh, Boibeis, Pirushim, has 2 interpretations. He's going to begin with an interpretation that we did not say yet. We gave his second interpretation, that it means a quarter. A Rova from the word Revi'i. Revi'i means a quarter. But first he gives another Pirush, Rova. Rova comes from the word insemination. Like, what does that mean in insemination? That's the idea that the male inseminates the female. So who can count the insemination of Israel? So what does that mean? So Rashi also explains that. I mean, who can count the great the child, the offspring? So there are so many that there are so many children being born that the point over here, it's not just a physical intimacy, but it's in a physical intimacy that actually impregnates, inseminates, which, a general population, even if they want to increase their population, not necessarily that there is a blessing in their unions that it should produce offspring. A lot of times, God forbid, there can be a childlessness. And even when there isn't, there's, only a certain amount of unions produce a child. However, there's a blessing by Israel that there will be so many that who can count the insemination of Israel. That's a simple meaning. But there is a much deeper meaning over here on the spiritual level. Our connection to God through Torah and mitzvot is much more than just obeying God's commandments. Every time we do a mitzvah, we're engaging in a intimacy, literally, with the divine. Our souls are the female. We're part of the Shekhinah, which is part of the feminine element of the divine. And the mitzvah itself is emanating from the masculinity of God, which is the infinite light. There's a concept explaining Shekhinah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shekhinah means the indwelling light of God, God's light as it is already invested in creation, completely invested. It's even much lower than the lights that are in vessels that we discussed earlier. That's above creation because that's still in the world of creation. What carries down those energies from the world of Atzilus into actual creation is the attribute called Malchut, which is also referred to as Shekhinah. Shekhinah means from the word dwelling. God dwells within time and space. So the soul of the universe is called Shekhinah. The Jewish people, being that we play a major role in the universe, we're the purpose of the universe. For that reason, the Jewish souls have a huge percentage of the Shekhinah inside of them. In other words, unlike every creature and every being that has life from God in it, from the tiniest subatomic particle to the great galaxy with billions of stars, the Milky Way or whatever it is, they all possess some bit of energy, some bit of light from the Shekhinah. However, the Jewish soul is super mega, much, much bigger than anything else, because we're the inner light of the Shekhinah. Therefore, souls are literally called the limbs of the Shekhinah. So that's us. But then there is a level of the divine that is the male side of God. The male side of the God, meaning God as he is above creation. Generally, all the 9 Sefirot above Malchut in the world of Atzilus is called HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh Baruch Hu means the Holy One, blessed is he, which is referring to God as God is infinite and above the finite realm of time and space. Whenever we do a mitzvah, the mitzvot are called the limbs of God, the limbs of the Ein Sof, the limbs of the Sefirot of the world of emanation. So that means we have now an intimacy. So it's not only we're downloading, we're actually being intimate with God. And God is impregnating us with his light. That's called an insemination. And when Bilam was saying who can count the impregnation of Israel, it means that godly light that we draw into our souls and via our souls into the universe, which is this intimacy, is the sexual bond with God, that he's drawing down, he's literally inserting himself into us. His infinite light is being inserted into us, and that impregnates the soul, and through the soul, it brings a whole new growth, a whole new yield in the world, which is really going to only be revealed in the Messianic times, where the infinite is going to sprout forth from this world in an amazing manner, infinite potential, because of this impregnation. So that's the meaning of who can count. Rova. Rova means insemination. Now, why can't it be counted? Let's say how many mitzvot are done. Let's count how many Jews there are in all of history since the beginning of creation until the end of time, till Mashiach comes. Sure, there is a number. It's a lot of Jewish people. And how many mitzvot did each Jew do? A lot of mitzvahs. At the end of a person's life, there's a meter that counts the mitzvahs. You can take a look, just like a meter that counts every mile. There's a meter. So I'm sure it counts. It's a lot, but it's countable. The answer is, we're not referring to the actual number of mitzvahs, but we're talking about the inseminating energy. That light that seed that is being planted into us is a seed of the infinite. It's a seed from beyond time and space. And therefore, it's not countable. That's the meaning of who can count the insemination of Israel. However, remember we said that the word who, it doesn't say who can count. It says and count, implying that it could be counted. It could and it can't. The answer is because that being from who is inseminating us, who is impregnating us, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't have a intimacy with abstraction. If God is utterly abstract and infinite, we can't bond with him. A bonding has to be a woman and a man. They're both in a certain form. There's the female form and there's the male form. And the female form is meant to take in the male. She's built that way. She's structured that way. She has that receptiveness, take in the male. So if we are engaging in a intimate relationship with our husband, that's why the Torah is called a marriage. Our keeping the Torah, the giving of the Torah at Sinai was called a marriage. So God has to be already in some form. What's the form of God? We know that the Sefirot are in the image of a man. So even though there is, for example, there is kindness. Kindness is considered God's right hand. Judgment is considered God's left hand. Compassion, Tiferet, is considered God's torso. So there is a image, there is a man. And it's with that man that the Shekhinah is cohabiting with. Which means that we cohabit with every time we study Torah and we do a mitzvah. We are engaging in a intimacy with the infinite being, but after he's already enclosed himself in a certain form. Because he enclosed himself in a certain form, for that reason, he's also within the realm of number. Because how many mitzvot are there? 248 positive commandments, corresponding to the 248 limbs of man. We have 248 limbs in our body. God, as well, the spiritual limbs of the Sefirot are 248. And when we do a mitzvah, we're connecting one of those limbs. We're bonding on one level. When we do all the mitzvahs, it's a complete union between us and God. For that reason, it's number and it's also beyond number. It's number because even though we're talking about infinite Sefirot, but because they are already divided into limbs and has already specification, it's within the realm of number. Okay, so that's the meaning of umispar and counting the insemination of Israel. That Israel causes an insemination. It's a set number. If so, why do we say it's not a number? As we said before, you can also read it and who can count, which means it's not numbered. We'll see in a moment. Now, we'll see in a second. Let's just continue this so that we'll read it much easier. There's another interpretation to the word rova. As we said earlier, rova means a quarter. Which a quarter, what's the relationship between insemination and a quarter? The answer is, we know there are three worlds that make up creation. Bria, which is creation. It's a very, very, very lofty spiritual world. Yetzira, formation, where the world is already formed a little stronger, more form, more limitation. That's the world of angels. Finally, Afasisiv, there is the world of Asiya, the world of completion, which ultimately results in our physical planet. Three stages of existence. Then there is the fourth. What's the fourth? The fourth is this world where God resides as a man. That's also called the world. Because if God is a human, he has to live somewhere. Where does he live? He lives in that world. That's the fourth world. And that's where the insemination takes place. When we down here bond with the fourth dimension. That's why it's called a quarter. It's also called, the word rova also means insemination. Because it's within that man who lives in the world of Atzilus that we cohabit with when we're doing a mitzvah. And that's where we encounter the number and the beyond number. That's all the service of the tzaddikim, which means the people who are always observant. Then the verse is going to say, who can count the earth of Jacob, is referring to a higher service, which are the Balei Tshuva, the people who are not keeping mitzvot all the time, but then they experience intense pain from their distance and they come running back to God. They create a much higher revelation. Let's read it inside. So he says, the word rova has two meanings. It says my archi, my ways, verivi, and my insemination, zerisa, you have measured. Simply it means that God measures us from when we are inseminated, from when we begin, from when we've been conceived. So that's the word rivi. Rivi means from the word Hashem zenikra meig shamim, and for this reason we also find that rain is also called b'shem revia. Rain is also called revia, like in the Sechtes Tainus and in the tractate of Tainus, where it talks about fast days, public fast days that many times were done when there was a lack of rain, was a drought. So the question the Talmud talks about, when do you start those public fast days? When the season was supposed to come. Now the rainy season, there's a first rainy season, there's a second rainy season. It's all in the beginning of the winter. October, November, December, it's that season. So the Talmud calls it the first season. It calls it the first Revia and the second season. Why is it called it Revia? It's not a quarter. Why is it called Revia? It's because that's also an insemination. Because what happens? The earth is called mother. The earth is female. The earth is a woman. Because the female is a recipient. Give its influence to the earth through rain. The rain falls from the heaven. And just like it's a fluid that is passed from a man to a woman during an insemination, so to the rain is called the insemination of heaven to earth. Earth is like the woman. She takes in the rain and then she produces, just like the woman produces a child. So make Sham, he's just proving that an influence from the giver to the receiver, a seminal type of transmission, is called rova, revia. Shem revia, k'may revia rishaina, the first insemination, revia shnia, the second insemination. But again, in the simple meaning, it means the first rain period, the second rain period, because the sages tell us the mitra, that rain, baila da'ara, is the husband of the earth. The earth is the woman. She receives from her husband from the sky through the rain. The rain is actually that insemination. So that's one pirush in the word rova, va'beis. The second interpretation of the word rova, meloshen arba, from the word four, or a quarter. What does that mean? The Inyan and the idea is, the Inay Knesset Yisroel, the Jewish people, which means the collection of Jewish souls in this world, not only in this world, all the Jewish souls, whether they're in heaven or down here in this world, all together we are called Eretz, we are called land. Remember, land is the same, is female. So we're God's wife. Nikar b'shem Eretz, kamay shekasa, like it says. There is a verse that says, Eretz, 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 shimi devar Hashem. Land, 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 listen to the word of God. What is the prophet speaking to? Hearken to the word of God. He's speaking to the earth. He wants the earth to listen. He wants the people on earth to listen. Which people? The Jewish people. So do you see that the Jewish people are called land, land, land? It says 3 times land. Why 3 is a question and discussed. But you see that the Israel is called land. As stated in the great discourse, which is the first discourse in Torah Or, which is the great book of the Alter Rebbe. Umitra, and the rain. Shubaila da'ara. If we're the land, we're called land, and land is female. She can produce, but in order for produce, she needs to be inseminated. How does she become inseminated? She becomes inseminated from her husband. So we need to bring down some kind of insemination to activate the power that is inside the Jewish soul. Just like the earth needs the rain. What is that? The Torah and the mitzvahs are called an impregnation. Through this, every mitzvah and every time we study Torah, we're downloading godly influence into our soul, and hopefully it takes effect, and it causes us to be able to produce a lot of godly light in this world. Plants, the ultimate beautiful plants. And in general, when the soul, now this is referring to on all levels, the souls even when they're in heaven. But more specifically, this impregnation can only happen when the soul becomes enclosed in a body. Because only here do we have access to the Torah and the mitzvahs, which is the inseminating light. When souls are disembodied and they're in heaven, even though they're very, very bright and beautiful, but they're single. They don't have a husband. Or even if they're married, they don't have any intimacy with their husband. God is not interested in intimacy in a bodiless soul. The intimacy happens when we're enclosed in bodies. Through the study and Torah and the performance of mitzvahs down here below, we arrive to the light, which the light is the masculine insemination that inseminates our soul. For behold, now he's going to explain that idea. He's going to explain what are we becoming inseminated with. So let's understand, our souls to begin with are very godly. We're saying that when we do a mitzvah, we become impregnated with something bigger than what we have. But hold it, we're already godly because we have a soul. So he's going to explain, no. Yes, it's true, the soul is godly, but the soul stems from only the vessels of the divine. The containers, the vessels. And in order to become really fertile, to be able to produce, we need to receive the lights that go in the vessels, because that's where the real infinite is. In we say in our prayers, the soul that you have given in me, Tahiri, she's pure, which is explained in many places. It means that our soul stems from B'chinas HaKelim, from the vessels of the divine. Who Inyan Yisroel, which is higher than creation. These are God's vessels, the vessels of the Sefirot. That's why they're called pure, because there's no separation there at all. There's no separate consciousness, totally attached to God. And that's the idea that it says in the Midrash, Yisroel alu b'machshava, that Israel arose in God's thoughts even before creation. That means Israel, the souls of Israel, transcend creation because they're not part of the world of Bria, which is the world of creation. We are of the world of Atzilut, the world of emanation, which is utterly divine. Souls are of the divine. However, the very fact that we're just from the vessels is a far more limiting factor. It makes us infinitely beyond all other creations, but it still limits the soul because it's only the vessels. And the vessels is already a limitation. Torah mitzvahs, but when we learn Torah and we do mitzvahs, especially, and the value of Torah mitzvahs, why can't we do the Torah mitzvot in heaven? Why couldn't God give us the spiritual mitzvah? Every mitzvah, of course, has a spiritual energy. So souls in heaven can do mitzvahs. The answer is, the only reason God engages with us when we do a mitzvah is because he gets a kick out of it. Well, how does God? It's entertaining to him. It's exciting to him. Why is he excited? Because when we are in bodies, we have an evil inclination not to do a mitzvah. We have laziness, we have selfishness, we have all kinds of lowly things that block and interfere with our observance of the Torah. And in order to do a mitzvah, we have to overcome that. We have to subdue the dark side. And when we do that, that is enjoyable to God. And then he engages on the other side of the mitzvah. When we do the mitzvah, he engages as well. He's right there and then, and he's inseminating our soul with his light. When we are subduing our evil inclination. And even more than that, sometimes we even manage to convert our negative dark side. Boim, what does that do? Boim, we arrive to become absorbed, begufa the malka. The Zohar uses a term that through mitzvot, it's like a husband and a wife where they become one flesh. When a husband and wife have an intimacy, they cease being two. Now they become one. And they continue being one through their child. But at that moment, he and she have turned into one. So the Zohar says that through a mitzvah, we become absorbed in the body of the king. The body over here does not mean the vessels. The body over here means to exclude the vessel. The vessel is considered like a garment. We're being absorbed in the body, which means in the very substance of the king, which is into the light itself. Our soul gets a tremendous upgrade. It's upgraded into the light, which means we become subsumed and swallowed into the infinite. And we become part of the real infinity. We're now drawn in and become part of the lights. And this is the meaning, and that's why besides being inseminated, which the word rova means to be inseminated, it also means four. What does that mean, four? We become one with the fourth level, which is the world of Atzilus. And even higher than the vessels, we become part of the lights of Atzilus. The Gimel Olam is Biyah, because the three lower worlds, Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, which I discussed earlier, the realms of creation, Ham Machshava, Dibur, and Ma'isa, they're God's thought, speech, and action. Those three worlds correspond to thought, speech, and action. And the Basiya Ksiv, Af Asisiv, Lahafsike Inyan. Because in the world of Asiya, it says, Barasiv, I created it, Yitzartiv, I formed it, Af Asisiv, I also made it. Which means that the physical is completely disconnected from God. But precisely because of its disconnection, that's why it's so meaningful to God. When we do a mitzvah, while we reside in the most disconnected existence. So the word af comes to separate. God says, I created, I formed it, I also made it. So the also is distancing the making it, which is the final world, is disconnected. It's a disconnected consciousness. We feel very much autonomous. We feel very much separated from God's reality. We have our own selfish, because we have such a separated consciousness, we have our own agendas and our own desires and our own lives to live. And we can, God forbid, utterly ignore God. Precisely because of that, God covets, he desires, he yearns that we should engage with him. It's like a man who wants to chase the woman that he can't have. God is chasing us because he can't have us. Because we're so naturally slip away from him. We so naturally forget him. and we make God chase after us. But precisely because Asiya, the world of Asiya, is so disconnected, that's why it's interesting to God. And when we do a mitzvah in the physical, the word af, which comes to separate, which creates a separation between our physical world and a more spiritual world, which is connected. So the word af is a disconnect, but the word af is also, comes to add. Af also means also. That means that where do we find the fourth world? It's Barasiv, Yitzartiv, Asiya. Where do we find the fourth world? Which the fourth world is the divine world. We can only find it in the world of separation. The af and the word af mar b'pchenes revius comes to add the fourth level. Pchenes atzilus, the world of atzilus, which primarily doesn't mean the vessels of atzilus, but it means the lights of atzilus. Shezeh pchenes ha'oros, because the main idea of atzilus is the lights, not the vessels. So shezeh pchenes ha'oros, which are the lights, because the vessels of the world of atzilus, because in atzilus there's also vessels, but the vessels of those worlds is the creation of that world. It's not really the emanation. The real emanation of Atzilus are the lights of Atzilus, which is what we access when we learn Torah and we do a mitzvah in the physical world. V'zeo. Now, on that engagement that we engage with God and draw down His light, and that's called this cohabitation with Hashem. That's the fourth world, and also insemination, that we become inseminated by Him. And that's why it says, and count as Rova Yisroel, the insemination of Israel. Why? Counting implies that we could count it, because he explains, mitzvahs, because the mitzvahs, hem bizmanu makod. We find that mitzvot, although they're divine, they all come to us in a manner of time and space. Every mitzvah has its time. Tefillin, you can't put on at night. You have to put it by day. Shabbos, you can't keep Shabbos on Monday. You can only keep Shabbos on Shabbos. And eat matzah, you can only do it once a year on Passover. So is every mitzvah. It's got its time and its place. For example, sacrifices you can only do in the temple. Mashakasav l'chol zman, it says in the verse, to everything there is a time, the ace and a set period. L'chol chayfetz, for every desirable thing, even God's desires, which are the mitzvahs, tachas hashamayim, beneath the heaven, gam b'chenes cheftzei shamayim, even God's things are within time and space. And that's why he's explaining why they could be numbered. Because since the lights are, even though we're engaging with the lights, but the lights are already vested in the vessels, and the vessels are the source of time and space, so the light is also already related to time and space. And therefore, that's why even that which we draw down through the mitzvahs is considered numbered. And this is the idea of Taryag mitzvah, 613 mitzvahs, which we said earlier is God when God is called already a man. Because the human figure is 248 limbs and 365 arteries, blood vessels. So when God fixes himself into a man, that's when the light goes into vessels. That's when God becomes a man. And in that level is where we interact with him and cohabit with him, so to speak, when we do a mitzvah. When you taryag mitzvahs, taryag orchen dezah, which are the 613 pathways of the Ze'er Anpin, which is the divine man. Which are 613 downloads from the Ein Sof, from the infinite one. However, even though it's numbered, because it's a set amount, but really, it's without a number. Why? Because once you start probing every mitzvah, you find out that in every mitzvah there are so many details and details of details, and you can split here. You can go on, and especially in the Torah, in the study of the mitzvot, you can go on and 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 endlessly open up doors and doors and doors in every mitzvah. Now, how can the mitzvahs, if they're fixed, be really have infinite? You can journey inside of them onto infinity. The answer is because even though they're the supernal man, which has already a certain definition, they originate in the lights that are above Atzilus, and those lights are truly infinite. That's why it's number and non-number. We're going to speak about this more tomorrow because I thought we're going to finish the class today, but we're not. We're going to finish the Maamor today. We're going to have one more class here. Is kol mitzvah, every mitzvah, mischalekes, gets subdivided, the pratim rabim, to details without an end, le'en kates v'tachlis, without any number. V'hakoach lezechulu. V'hakoach lezechulu. Why are the mitzvot numbered? We understand. Because the mitzvot are emanating from a place where God vested himself already into these vessels, and these containers have already some borders and boundaries, which are the underpinnings of time and space. But why are the mitzvahs without a number? And the power for this, that the numbered mitzvot should really be without a number, is because it's really coming from a higher place, from the source of where it comes from, before it becomes divided into 613 chulu for Inyan, and this is chad orcha de palgusa de sara de galgalta. It's the one pathway of the split here of galgalta of the skull, which is a Kabbalistic phrase for some element of the keter, the crown from where the mitzvah comes from. From that place come the 613 mitzvot. So they come from a place that's still beyond division. And that's number and non-number. We're going to finish this Be'ezrat Hashem. We're going to go over this last point Be'ezrat Hashem tomorrow, and we're going to finish this.